Hello everyone and welcome to Season 5 of Crave Arts Presents The Future of Film, featuring intimate interviews with the best emerging filmmakers from around the world. My name is Tom Oliva and I am co-founder and executive director of Crave Arts and the All-American High School Film Festival, dedicated to discovering, showcasing, and uniting the next generation of visual storytellers and content creators. In October of 2024, we celebrated our 12th annual festival. 12 years in, and our community is thriving, a testament to the power of believing in the arts and the emerging artists that share their stories with us. The collective spirit of our organization, our community, and all of our year-round initiatives is rooted in a shared passion. A passion to breathe life into stories, to collaborate with others who share your vision, and to create content at the highest level. Content with the ability to move viewers emotionally, to inspire with unprecedented style and craft, and to impact real change. Some quick updates from the All-American Bulletin Board as we gear up for our 13th annual festival in New York City. We're busy preparing for our 2025 festival, which will take place this October 17th to 19th in New York City, and submissions are open via Film Freeway with the final deadline on July 30th. Head over to hsfilmfest.com to get the latest news and updates about the 2025 festival. You can save on early bird tickets, book your discounted hotel rooms at the Hilton Midtown Hotel, and check out our downloadable 2025 budget guide, planning guides, and posters. It's never too early to begin planning your all-American adventure. If you plan on attending the festival in New York City, we highly recommend competing in one of our film invitational competitions, the world's premier on-site student filmmaking competitions in New York City from October 15th to 17th. We offer a variety of real-world, authentic production experiences for student filmmakers and video production programs. Your chance to crew up and produce a short film in just 10 weeks. Registration opens in May. For anyone looking for new gear, be sure to visit our Preferred Partners discount page under the Resources tab on our website to check out awesome discounts on a variety of gear and software. And teachers, if you're looking for a great way to boost your curriculum and elevate and inspire your students, check out our video production resource community and roadshow. 2 terrific in-person or remote opportunities featuring lesson plans and interactive presentations based on our library of exemplary student films. More information can be found at hsfilmfest.com under our Education tab. Today's guest, Wesley Wang from Jericho, New York, is an alumni from 2022 and 2023 whose films Mute 2022 and Nothing Except Everything 2023 received nominations in our most competitive award categories, including Best Direction and Best Drama, and he was the winner of Best Screenplay in 2022 and Best Overall Film in 2023. We were also thrilled to recognize Wesley as our Elevation Award recipient at our 2024 Teen Indie Award Show. At just 20 years old, Wesley's accomplishments seem hard to believe. Currently studying economics at Harvard University, an 11-time national chess champion who established the nonprofit Chess Sanity to promote the game in underprivileged schools around the country, named to Forbes 30 Under 30 annual list for Hollywood and entertainment, 10-plus wins from prominent film festivals, including the Grand Jury Prize at Indianapolis's Indie Shorts Film Festival, viral success on YouTube for his short Nothing Except Everything with over 8 million views. And he's officially the youngest writer and director ever to secure a feature-length film deal with a major studio. After 4 offers, Wesley signed on with Sony TriStar Pictures to adapt Nothing Except Everything for the big screen, with Darren Aronofsky's Protozoa Pictures producing. Yes, that Darren Aronofsky. The Whale, Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan. It's an overwhelming list of accomplishments, and I likely left a lot out. So it's safe to say that we also recognized Wesley's incredible talent when his submissions first came in. Our initial and honestly continued reaction echoes that of just about everyone we've heard comment on his work. It goes something like this. Wow, did a high school filmmaker conceive this idea, let alone produce this film? The answer is as impressive as his accolades and body of work. Innate talent, visionary perspective, consistent practice and application, a relentless work ethic, boundless grit and determination, and an overall unwavering perseverance and passion for bringing his stories to life. Simply put, this level of filmmaking at this age doesn't just happen. And it certainly, as some might want to believe, wasn't handed to him. Wesley earned every ounce of this praise. Make no mistake, all of Wesley's short films are amazing, and all deserve considerable attention in this introduction. But, of course, we want to hear from Wesley, so I'll just say a few things about his latest film, the viral sensation and soon-to-be feature film, Nothing Except Everything. Soon after his big win for Best Overall Film, I began screening this short as the grand finale of my roadshow presentations, literally sharing it with tens of thousands of emerging filmmakers all over the world as a testament to where the bar is set. It always garners the same reaction that I mentioned earlier, a combination of disbelief and awe, but also a healthy dose of inspiration and motivation to dream bigger and do better. My intro prior to screening. This is a story about being young, being in high school on the verge of leaving home and becoming an adult. It's about being you, right now, full of questions without concrete answers, full of experiences that you know you will leave behind. It's about how crazy and random life is and how hard it is to make anything good last. Miles, the protagonist, is you. He's any teenager experiencing an inevitable moment of significant change, when everything feels like it's coming at you at 1,000,000 miles per hour, when every decision and moment feels enormous and yet somehow also meaningless. He wants answers, to know if anything he does matters. He wants to connect with the past, present, and future. He wants purpose and meaningful connections. He wants to know what it all means, if it means anything at all. And his obstacle is as big as his questions. If we all eventually die, then why care about anything? Why invest in relationships and moments? Why think of anything as significant if it's all just going to pass and fade? The fact that this young filmmaker even attempts to tackle this is impressive enough. But that he does so in such an emotionally rich and authentic way is truly remarkable. I am honored to be joined by Wesley Wang today. Hey, Wesley, welcome. How are you?
Hey Tom, it's an honor to be here again with you guys.
Great to reconnect. We're going to start the conversation by kicking things off with a little segment we call This or That. In this quick reply exercise, I'm going to provide two options and you just share which you prefer. Cool?
Yeah, of course. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. This is the one we always start with, pizza or pasta?
I'll go pizza.
All right, that's a popular choice. Sticking in this line of thought, sushi or cheeseburger?
Sushi.
Soda or water?
Water. I'm trying to be a little more healthy.
It's the start of a new year. I mean, we all are.
Yeah.
All right, dressed up or dressed down?
Ooh. Either. Sometimes I like to get a little dressed up for that award show, as you know, but
Yeah.
usually day to day I'm like this.
Okay, all right. Ocean or mountains?
That's so tough. Probably mountains. I've been hiking a lot recently.
Awesome. I also like to hike. Okay, city or suburbs?
City.
Innocence or evil?
Innocence, I guess. Just based
I,
on
I
the
think
phrasing of
so.
that question. Yeah.
Lo-fi or high tech?
Mm, high tech.
All right. Wide angle or close up?
Wide angle.
That's a one we're going to have to dig into a little bit there. All right. Experimental or realism?
These are too tough, man. Experimental.
Okay. Drama or comedy? I know I'm literally throwing the
Drama.
paradoxes
Yeah,
that
these are.
define your work.
This is so tough.
All right. And finally, film school or DIY?
DIY.
Okay. All right, let's dive a bit deeper into all things Wesley Wang. I have so many questions and so much I want to cover, but let's start with your path and how you got to where you are today. I know that recognition creates skeptics, even haters, people who are envious of your success and the fact that you were able to raise funds and put together an incredible cast and crew for Nothing Except Everything, essentially creating a professional independent short film. But I also know that this didn't just happen overnight, that you started making movies when you were 11 years old. Can you talk a little bit about your path from 11-year-old Wesley, the filmmaker, to Wesley, the filmmaker, Nothing Except Everything?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a long but very, very rewarding journey. It's been pretty crazy. I started just making really small stuff when I was a kid, just when I was 11 years old. I got a gift from my parents that was like this little camera, and I was just playing around with it at first. But when I started watching movies, like these movies that now inspire me today, like Whiplash, Inception, and stuff like that, it just made me feel like, wait, this is actually possible. And so a lot of these idols, these filmmakers became my inspirations for making really small stuff because they always said it doesn't matter how small it is, but at least, if you could just cast your brother, your dad as like cop, serial killer, you can make something, So I made stuff, showed it to my friends, and it was a good laugh, but soon enough I wanted to go bigger and bigger and bigger. And with that, I started reaching out to people just around me. I got scammed maybe dozens of times in my life by that whole thing of like being like, oh yeah, we'll help you for this and that. But it was a really great learning process. And with each film, I was able to get a bigger and bigger cast and crew. And with that, I was teaching chess as well on the side because I grew up playing chess until like basically my film passions grew over. And so I funded most of my films through that. And that was a long grind as well. But after I figured that out, then I was able to make something like Nothing Except Everything. So it was mostly just proving myself with each film that I made, each short film that I made, and making them bigger and bigger.
And that's why I made a point in the introduction to talk about that sense of practice and practical application. Again, this wasn't just handed to you. This is like one film after another. And with each film, were you working like purposely on growing certain aspects of your craft?
I'd say it was a mixture of a lot of different aspects. I think each time it was definitely trying to experiment with different genres and different kind of tones and themes. But yeah, as you said, like Nothing Except Everything, I wish I could have made it like my first film, but obviously it was probably I think I counted this the other day of like 20th different projects, like of short film, commercial, music videos. I was doing also music videos and commercials for random small companies as well. And so all of those practiced how I would be on set and do coverage and stuff like that.
And along the way, you developed a pretty distinct voice. And I had never seen Eve before. I'm still confused about why that didn't get submitted to All American. You probably just didn't even know we
I
existed at the
didn't even
time.
know. Yeah.
You would have cleaned up with that one as well. I watched it yesterday, and just man, the combination of raw authenticity, but also a very rich theme underlying the whole thing, really stood out, and it's kind of a hallmark of everything that I've seen that you created. How did that voice kind of develop, and do you have a way of describing what your voice is now as a filmmaker, as a writer?
Yeah, it's funny. After Nothing Except Everything, obviously people were like framing me as this kind of young voice for the generation and that makes movies about young people and for young people. And a lot of the offers I got at first were like coming of age stories and stuff like that. But I realized that it evolves always, and so I think it's tough to say if I have a specific voice. Maybe that's more for you to judge, and maybe other people. Maybe I do have certain tendencies for sure of like how I like to shoot things or write things. But I don't know if I know even what my specific voice is as of now.
I, I would say something along the lines of a keen eye for understanding and expressing humanity. And
Mm,
that's a very broad umbrella. And we'll get more into that. I've heard you talk about cold emailing, and I
mm.
certainly know something about this from when I started All American. Yeah, we're going to make this huge international film festival for high school filmmakers because I know there's a ton of them out there. And where do you start? And you just start somewhere, and then
Yeah.
that list grows into a larger list, and that list then grows into a larger list. But can you elaborate on this essential piece of your work ethic and overall filmmaking process, the sense of just consistent cold outreach?
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear just because you brought it up. Like, did you know Andrew Jenks beforehand? Like, was that a cold email or like? But anyway, I can start first, I guess. No, for me, it was like a lot of it was I really didn't know anyone, and so Scott was. So, for example, if you take Nothing Except Everything, I emailed like 200 different producers. That I went down a list of basically I got IMDb Pro, which is a great resource for finding people's emails because they usually list them there. And I went down a list of people that won South by Southwest or Sundance or Tribeca because those were the hallmarks. And maybe I should add in All American High School Film Festival next. But no, for real, like a lot of that's definitely a hallmark now for a lot of high schoolers. And
Mm-hmm.
so And those were the producers that I would be reaching out to because I knew they had a track record of making these things that were successful. And so basically everyone rejected me until Scott was like, you know what? I see the hunger and the grit that you got, and I'll give you a shot, because he read the script and he really liked it. And so I think if you email enough people and shoot enough shots, there will be one person that believes enough in your vision to be like, okay, I will guide you at least a little bit and show you what I know. And that he was probably the greatest blessing of my film career probably so far.
Hundreds of emails you sent.
Yeah, hundreds. In terms of that project, hundreds, but in terms of like my entire filmmaking career, maybe 1,000. I don't know.
Well, and to answer your question, Andrew Jenks was my student when I was teaching at a small high school in upstate New York, and
Wow.
he just had such a clear passion for filmmaking, wanted to start a little film club, and I was the new teacher at the school, and he wasn't even my student. But he heard about this new teacher, and he was like, "Hey, can you be the advisor?" One thing led to another. We started a little local film festival. He graduated. We stayed in touch. Speaking of hundreds of emails, he came up with this idea that he wanted to move into an assisted living facility, senior living nursing home, because his grandfather was suffering from dementia, and it was really beating him up, seeing him, in his final
Yeah.
years and being in this place that sort of seemed lonely. And Andrew, being sort of a visionary, basically said, "Hey, I want to make a movie about this. I want to move into a nursing home." And we literally cold emailed and called hundreds, if not 1,000 nursing homes until one finally said yes. So between that and starting All American, same thing. It was, well, where do we begin? I looked at U.S. News and World Report, and I was like, hey, all of the top 100 high schools in the country, if they're doing something right, they must have a video production program or something like this.
Yeah.
And just
No.
started cold
Yeah.
emailing until, again, list after list, and then, you finally get some hits. So it is an integral part of the process, and I think it really does come down to that word grit and determination. Like, if you believe in something and you're willing to give it everything you've got, eventually perseverance will pay off.
Yeah.
That leads me to my next question, because I have heard this and it really bothers me because I know the process. I got to see your growth as a filmmaker. I saw Mute come in, and then I saw you take Mute and take it even to another level with Nothing Except Everything. To people who say you have an unfair advantage, what do you say?
Oh yeah. I think it's natural I used to like when I look at successful filmmakers is it comes from a place of for me it was jealousy and so I understand it and I empathize with it obviously. But no, I mean I know what it took for me to get here and obviously I don't. It's hard for me to respond directly to these I guess to these people, but I just want to say like a lot of the stuff that I've done. My parents literally came here from nothing, and so if you want to say that like my parents got to a certain level and then they helped me raise me to that level which I am today, I guess then you have to give them most of the credit and I'm fine with that. And so yeah, I definitely was privileged enough to go to a public high school that was supportive and had a lot of teachers that helped me, and I'm sure you did the same for your students. But in terms of all the connections that I made, it was all completely cold emails, and this funding was all through chess lessons, and or at least the majority of it. And some I reached out to other people for funding. But yeah, it was I guess somewhat at least it's ground up.
Yeah, and you put the work in, and you earned every minute of it. And I certainly, think that's amazing, and it's an amazing part of your story, especially because of the success you've reached. And I think it's a great lesson for everyone to hear. And also your parents, thank you for giving them props. I have two teenage sons, and if they do something, I hope that they'll remember, all of the hard work and sacrifice that we gave. And I loved that your parents came to the Teen Indie Awards to see you accept the Elevation Award. That was really special. And you were the only person to ever come and bring flowers for Andrew, so that was very sweet as well.
It was my mom's idea. Yeah.
There you go. See, raised well. This is all related to something I heard you say, actually, that you don't suddenly have credibility. Can you explain why you think this is so important, especially for our community of young filmmakers to know this how you build credibility?
Yeah, for sure. This is funny. Like I was even having this conversation the other day because even making this feature film that I have now, this incredible opportunity, obviously like, oh, now like I have I have all the resources and abilities to make this and this position, but really like I'm competing with people like Darren Aronofsky that have way more say than I do in the industry. And so I'm still having to make sacrifices to get my movie made. And yeah, it always feels like you're playing an uphill battle, I guess, in that way. It's That kind of gives you perspective on the relativity of that. But yeah, it's for the credibility part, like for me to reach out to Scott, I had to reach out to other people before he would, because he saw my other films and then was like, okay, this guy can do this certain level. And so yeah, it was, as I've said earlier, it's a kind of each film was a stepping stone for me of gaining credibility gradually. And it's always an uphill fight. And yeah, you never, yeah, it's really tough to leap from one place to another in just like a single day.
Is the lesson then just to keep making movies and to keep trying to get better with everyone?
Yeah, and experimenting with different ways to make movies. If you think that like this path of making movies that you're on right now isn't working, maybe it's not a matter of like the quality of your movies isn't working, but you have to use a different just method in general. Like maybe you shouldn't be doing independent films. Maybe you shouldn't be making a series out of it. Maybe you should be going through a more corporate route of like being a development exec at first. There's a lot of routes to getting a movie made, writing, directing a movie. So yeah, I guess that's also another thing to think about.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so let's shift to your creative process. Where does your inspiration come from?
Um, all over the place, honestly. Like it's could be something I read, but for nothing except everything, I guess it was, and I think one of the reasons it worked so well was personal experience. Just, I was kind of like, I'd made a bunch of stuff about things that I was reading online about, like Eve, for example, or Mute, and was a script that I read online on Reddit actually, and I literally just was like, hey, can I shoot your script? But for nothing except everything, it was just personal experience of like everyday high school. I wanted to make something that my friend and I would go to the theaters and watch, and I felt like I wanted to watch in theaters because it was to me the most personal thing that I've made up until that point. And so yeah, that was definitely the inspiration for that one.
I think it comes from a really true place, and that definitely transcends to the screen. I've had the pleasure of watching your films, Eve, Mute, Nothing Except Everything. Can you talk about your approach to creating a story, like how you visualize scenes based on everyday life, all the way through conveying those scenes on the screen for the viewer?
Um, Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of filmmaking is definitely communication. Like a lot of people get it maybe mixed up that it's more so about, yeah, just communicating in terms of like communicating to your, crew and cast about how you act out the scene to translate what you're trying to feel. But also it's communicating to your audience, I think is the most important thing because sometimes you have this idea that you're trying to communicate onto the film, but then you play it back for other people and then it doesn't really translate. So I've been trying to show my movie or script to as many people as possible beforehand before I move it to the next stage. Like, for example, if it's a treatment, I don't want to start writing a script until I get the treatment approved from a large amount of people that are like, this is working, that's working. So then you can tell that you're communicating your ideas as clear as possible. So one part of it is having a really good idea, but for sure, another part of it is the execution.
And do you walk through everyday life as I imagine you might, literally visualizing the ideas you have, turning them into images on the screen?
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure like a ton of teenagers have this experience where they're like, just walking home from school or like looking out the window on the school bus and listening to music, and it really gets you in the zone. You're like watching a movie inside your head. And sometimes I just feel like this needs to be a movie, and but it's very hard to then sit down and write it on your page. And so that's like half the work for me of like learning how to communicate what's in your head on pages and then onto screen.
And is that you capturing tone? Is that you evoking tone, like music and imagery being married and then working together with the words?
Yeah, I think for music was a big part of Nothing Except Everything for sure. It was like a matter of because I had the music before I even shot list or wrote the script even, and so I knew the kind of tone of like each like the rhythm of it almost as it moved, and so I think that was a big part of it too. Yeah.
You've also talked about how you read scripts while watching movies to see, what comes through and what gets lost in translation. I heard you say this in another interview, and I just love that. What have you learned from that process?
Yeah, I mostly what I learned is how much a movie changes like in its multiple iterations. Sometimes you read the first draft and then you read the final draft of what got approved, and it's like, wow, like for even at this, like, I won't give too much away about the feature film I'm working on, but from the start, from the script I had written at first, and now the script that the studio wants me to make, or at least they're liking more now, it's much more different. And so I guess it's different when you're working on an independent film, but it's still similar when in the way where what you think is going to happen on screen is going to be very different from like actually what finally hits the screen. And so you need to be prepared for all these changes, and sometimes it's logistic, but sometimes it's just creative, and you need to be open-minded enough to be like, okay, I was wrong at first, like maybe this can work better. And yeah.
And related to that, going back to what we were talking about a second ago, when you get feedback from the people you show your films to, and I love the idea of, they're watching your film and you're watching them. I've always loved
Yeah.
that concept.
Yeah.
Just seeing reactions and you're like, oh, this is it. And it's like, oh, that didn't work. But
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
they reacted to this and whoa, I didn't expect that. So I can build that up more. How difficult is it to sacrifice your baby, to
Yeah.
like when someone says like you're like this is my favorite part and it just doesn't work. How
Oh
hard is that
yeah,
process?
it's so hard. I've had to sometimes I fight with my, whoever I'm working with, and I win, and I'm like, okay, I get this finally thing that I wanted. But sometimes you're right, like the audience just doesn't react to something that I'm like, this is gonna be hilarious, and they don't, and it's tough because then you're like, you have to put your ego behind you, and you're like, this is what is actually working, and then usually what happens is like a week later you come back and you're like, oh, of course that was the right decision, right? And
Right.
so sometimes it's just a matter of like you need to get outside your own head, and that's a tough thing for filmmakers who are especially so immersed in the world. Sometimes it helps to take a step back.
I think that's great advice for our community, and something I really encourage young filmmakers to do is share your work.
Yeah,
Sit down, do more table reads, do more run
yeah,
throughs,
for sure.
and just read the room. And sometimes you have to let it go a little bit, and sometimes I think it's okay to be stubborn and just say no,
Yeah,
this is my vision, and I think that's part of success as well. You've also talked about screenwriting as being super important, regardless of the
mm,
role that maybe you plan on pursuing in the industry. Learning the art of screenwriting. Why do you think that understanding screenwriting and that process is so important for anyone who wants
yeah.
to be involved?
Absolutely. I think for sure I stand by that in a sense of like I think screenwriting is probably the most important, and and you could tell by how much time it takes in a movie, like especially feature films that are made. It probably takes up as much time as production, casting, financing, post production all takes. And when you think about that, you realize how actually important the craft is. And so yeah, it's a matter because everything that is written is pretty much at least going to get filmed. And so it's just I can't emphasize how important that whole skeleton is of the film. And so learning the craft of that, of how to tell a story, of how to communicate characters, and how to um, how to make a plot seamless, and a three-act structure and all that stuff. Like it's such an important uh, just crap because it's just the basis of storytelling. And I think a lot of directors you see who are mostly just directors and not writers, they've been writers at a certain time in their life for sure. And so that's how they know how to bring a script alive. Like Denis Villeneuve is a great example where he started writing first and then he directed only directed afterwards.
Beyond just doing it over and over again, how did you learn to be a screenwriter? Were there specific, books that you read? Where, is it just studying other scripts? How did you learn that craft to be able to do it at such a high level at such a young age? And I know you still have a long way to go, and I know that you understand that no one is ever a complete artist,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But
for sure.
what was your process like to learn how to do it at a high level?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Even now, like I just sent my script out to my producers and they tore it apart. And so like I by no means want to be acting like I know what I'm doing in terms of screenwriting, but I one thing I do know is how important it is. And something I'll say is that like when I started writing, I think I started writing stories in general when I was like 6 or 7. And so the screenwriting route was just be putting it on screen, which is slightly different, but in a way it's the same kind of idea of telling a story. And so yeah, for me, it was watching a lot, reading a lot, and then dissecting how they worked, and analyzing different tropes and like similar things that they were doing. But also like some books just do that for you. Like Robert McKee's Story was a great read. Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, like all these, classics. But also, I was lucky enough to go to a screenwrite. There's like this USC screenwriting summer program that I applied to and got in, and they helped me like hold my hand and write a feature script. And so, like, I've had a lot of mentors and teachers that also helped me. And so, yeah, it's a combination of, I'd say, reading other people's scripts, reading books on how to write screenwriting, but most importantly, like screenwriting yourself and then showing it to people and then revising and then writing your next script.
I love how every piece is part of the process, you know,
Yeah.
and each piece informs the other. Um, and that's a great segue into my next question. I know that out of necessity, you probably had to perform all aspects of the process yourself in the beginning. You know, you were
Yeah.
writer and director, which you still are, but you were also holding the camera. You were also editing. Um, and now you've been lucky enough to hire folks to perform specific roles. And yet, I would imagine that you're thankful that you had experience with all of the roles before you were
Yes.
in the position to work with others. Can you explain why you think it's so important for young filmmakers to have an understanding of all of the different pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's impossible to, at least impossible on a high level, to communicate things to really talented people like cinematographers and editors who know like this stuff inside out. And I mentioned those two because they're probably going to be the most close collaborators to you and in terms of creative level. And so
Mhm.
if you haven't done it yourself and you don't know, you don't even need to know exactly the equipment and like all the details as well as them, but you need to know at least the craft of it and the trials and tribulations of it so you don't give them stuff that's either impossible to do or just like is going to waste time. It's not going to work. And so you need to have some kind of empathy there to be able to communicate with that person. You need to speak the same language in that way. And so, yeah, for sure, like a big part of I think why I was able to communicate with my cinematographer and editors successfully is because I did it before a ton. And yeah, and so for example, like my editor, I literally just sat down with him next to him in his little dungeon 12 hours a day for like 3 weeks straight. And and it was just a really, really beautiful process. I think editing Nothing Except Everything was one of my favorite processes because it's such a specific kind of rhythm to it and a specific kind of cohesive like product. And so, yeah, like editing that was important to be able to have edited beforehand and understand that craft.
If you weren't focused on being a writer and director now, would the role of editor be maybe next in line, or is there another aspect that you might sort of lean into?
Um, Probably editing would be third. I think if I had to take on another role besides writing and directing my own movie, it'd be probably editing it. But I just like the editor that I have too much because he also like we've been getting along together for many films now, and so he's a great friend and collaborator.
That's awesome. And don't mess with a good thing. Definitely
Yes.
keep that going. What about the role of director? I know you emphasized communication being important. What's your approach to being a director, and why do you feel like it's effective?
Um, it's a tough question. I'd say yeah. I mean, communication I've already said, but I direct. I think I'm stealing a quote from Christopher Nolan. He said, or
I knew you were
it
going
was
to drop
someone.
a quote at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah. At some point, I did that too many times during our
No,
relationship.
it shows your respect. I love it.
No, but Nolan said once he's like or it was someone. It's probably not even Nolan. I might be like butchering the name, but he said it, I only direct so that my scripts get made, you know. And so that was really true to me because for me the script writing process is like, you know, after you finish that, it's basically a full thing. It's in your head, and then you have it on page, and you're like, oh, it's very close to there, right? But then you just have to put it on screen, and so like going from script to screen is like probably the most important part of directing, of communicating that bridge and making sure everyone else gets that process and is on board with you to then bridge that bridge, I guess. So yeah.
And as you're writing, you literally are visualizing this. You're pretty much seeing it.
Yeah, I guess one of the things for me is that I'll say like I don't, it would be hard for me to direct something that I haven't written for that reason, because it's so ingrained. My direction is so ingrained by how I wrote the movie. Like some people have actually commented on my scripts that I have a very specific style of writing where like you can see the direction while I'm writing. You know, most people tell you in film school and just in school in general of like the art of writing, don't write, you know, pan or like music and stuff like that and camera directions when you're writing. But for me, like I don't do that exactly just because it's like not allowed, but I try to at least get a sense of how the picture moves as much as possible when I'm writing it.
It's really cool. Um, what do you like most about the process when you're from beginning to end? What's your favorite part?
Yeah, I've been asked this a lot, and I think my answer is although I genuinely love all of them, and all of them have their own quirks and uniqueness. Like for me, writing right now, which is what I'm consumed with like for the last year and probably for another a long bit, but it's it's so frustrating, but probably the most frustrating and rewarding process I'd say writing is, because it takes so long and it's a long grind, but it's at the end of the day what makes the core of your movie. I'd say editing is more of like a thing where it's like you have to do it, but it's so rewarding once you're finished with it because like it's literally the entire film. But I'd say the most and most exciting part, I guess, is the casting and financing because it's all coming together and it's like becoming this kind of project. But I'd say by far like the most exhilarating part of it, I guess, is being on set. Like just that environment is so unique to filmmaking. It doesn't really compare to at least what I've experienced in the arts. And so because you work so long to have that moment, all your pre-production development is for that. And so yeah, I'd say production is still probably my favorite part.
I love that. I'm curious when you're writing and you're completely consumed by it right now. So this is a good time to ask, how often are there moments, days, hours where, you're staring at the screen and, like, because this happens to me all the time. It might even be something as simple as, which I don't take lightly, writing an introduction for you or someone else on
Mhm.
the podcast or a critique for a film submission.
Yeah.
And I kind of know what I want to do, but I'm staring at the screen for 2 hours and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
enough is enough. And a lot of times, like one of my techniques is I find that if I just like lay down and close my eyes, all of it will come to me. And then I just have the job of remembering it and getting back to the computer. How often does that happen to you? And then do you have a trick?
No, I was gonna say like I do not have a trick at all. If I had a trick, that's one thing I'd pay like everything I have for right now is just getting rid of writer's block. It's the most famous thing that writers have, and I still have not resolved it at all. Writing this film has been the most frustrating part of my career so far, this feature film that I have, but the most rewarding because it's slowly coming together. But it's just on some days you feel like you've gone like 8 steps back, and then it's like really hard to recover from that just on a psychological level because you feel like you've lost everything you're so excited about, because sometimes when you're writing and you have that kind of adrenaline rush, it's a love-hate relationship, you know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
literally a relationship in of itself you have with this script. It's such a intense process in that way. So yeah, I don't know how to resolve it. I'd say one of the things that has helped in a sense, at least sometimes, is is detaching yourself from it in a way of like you just write everything that comes in your mind so that you can get rid of that block and then analyze. Someone told me that it's two separate brain parts of your brain working when you're writing and analyzing. And I've realized that I've been too much of a perfectionist in the way where I write and I'm like editing every single sentence after I finish writing it, and it just slows down the process so much, and you're never really satisfied with the page. And so I just learned to just write and then analyze after. Francis Ford Coppola, I think this quote is right from him. He said, "Don't read your pages until you get to page 100." And so I think that I haven't done it yet, but I've at least practiced that idea of like just writing a ton and then
That's
editing.
growth. Yeah, that's growth. And you just let it go and then come
Yeah,
back. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, where do you do it? Do you listen to music? Like,
Yeah, sometimes here I've been switching up the place a lot, just because sometimes when you're in the same place, it gets so frustrating. So yeah, I've been going around a lot. And yeah, I usually listen to music. Sometimes I'm so frustrated, and if it's not working, I'm like, it's the music's problem, man, and I take
yeah,
off
yeah.
the music. But yeah, so combination of all of it.
Cool. And just related to your favorite part, being on set, finally getting to that moment. What do you find is the hardest part? And maybe we just talked about it. I don't know.
Um, Maybe it's just because I'm writing right now, but yeah, I guess just because we talked about it too, I guess. But yeah, writing is probably the hardest for me. Um, Everything else I think comes a little more naturally, at least for me. Um, but yeah, it might be also just because I'm writing my first feature film for a studio, and it's a little daunting, and dealing with all the politics of that. And so yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. Well, that's very insightful. I want to dive a bit deeper into Nothing Except Everything. I think that's probably the film that most people who are listening have watched.
Mhm.
When screening your film, I often describe the narrative structure as past and present, time and space, happiness and despair, all intertwined as if the entire film is an exploration of the character's evolving subconscious.
Mm.
That sounds like kind of pretentious. I certainly don't mean it that way, and that's not the way I watch movies. But is that an apt description that past and present, time and space, happiness and despair, all of these things are intertwined in one
Yeah,
moment?
I know what you mean by the pretentious part, by the way, because I always feel that way when I'm writing something like that, like even the title, Nothing Except Everything. But
Right, right.
genuinely for me, it was just the best way to describe what I was feeling at the time, and whether that's pretentious or not was is up to the audience. I guess it was just authentic to me, and so I wrote at least the title of it to encapsulate what you were just talking about, it, the irony of life and everything in general. And so, nothing except everything is just probably the most ironic thing you can come up with. And so that consumed the film for me, all of its themes in one title. Yeah.
Maybe we should just rename high school Nothing Except Everything. I mean, I certainly feel like my two sons would understand what that means. And hey, maybe you're onto something. Now we're in the process of renaming things around, around the world. I also like to talk about how the viewer is continuously both near and far from the characters. That we see their entire world, both intimate and at a distance. Was this a conscious choice?
Interesting. I genuinely didn't think about that. I guess a conscious choice for me was at least the first part of like making sure we were with him throughout the whole journey. Um, and so it's interesting that you say you also sometimes felt like we were watching him in a way, because I wanted to feel like we weren't even watching him, we were just going through this journey with him. So I'm curious to hear more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I'm particularly thinking of the scene on the football field.
Mm,
And the pacing, the cut, the edit, it's a great example of the power of that in the film. But there's these incredibly intimate close-ups, and then all of a sudden we're far away. And so I
oh
feel like
yeah.
we're getting this incredible perspective of the character's experience. And that's why I love the power of cinema to do that, right? Because if you're actually in the moment, you're only in the close-up.
Yeah.
You don't have that opportunity to pan out and see the grand scale of what's happening.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just sort of complimenting, in a sense, your ability to communicate both the intimacy and the distance of every moment.
Yeah, I guess when you put it like that, I guess the point of that wide shot, I guess, was to kind of communicate the kind of the smallness that it is, and how I think someone put my film like this a lot, or a few people have, where it's like everything feels so big at that moment in your life, but
Yes.
it's so small in the grand scheme of things. And so I wanted to always cut back to that wide shot at the end of just like, but they're all just kids just playing on a football field at the end there.
Yeah. What about breaking the fourth wall and using the VHS and 8 millimeter footage? Why did you feel that these were the right choices for communicating the story?
Yeah, it's funny. The Super 8 and the VHS stuff, it's just so easy to get nostalgia out of those. It's funny if like iPhone footage, I'm curious in like 20 years will have the same, like evoke the same feeling. But no, I think for that it was a way to kind of communicate the nostalgia that the characters were going through. It wasn't that deep of a choice, I guess. And then breaking the fourth wall, it was um yeah, a way to just put it on the audience really quickly and grab their attention at the start, and then take them through this journey of like the high schooler's head. Like they were like talking to you and being like, hey, look, like this is what I'm thinking about the number seven. And like this is why I'm so confused. And then come on this journey with me kind of thing. And so I don't know. I thought it was just an effective way to kind of let the audience engage with the protagonist.
And that I love that, and I teach that. It's an immediate invitation for engagement,
Yeah.
and why not? And it works so well in the story. There's also an enormous range of emotions because the story is structured around juxtaposition, right? Peaks and valleys within every moment. The entire plot seems to revolve around this consistent pattern of action, reaction, and reflection. Was this a conscious decision or just a result of the story you're trying to tell taking its natural shape?
I love how you put it. I think probably the second one. I don't think I could even put it that well, but I'd say it was the story guiding like everything else. Just like however I felt like the main character should be like thinking about everything was how I tried to portray it on screen. And so, as you guys have probably seen, like the film starts really quick and is like a kind of frenzy, because I felt like that's how I guess my arc in this high school like kind of thing start the senior year started. And then it kind of slows down to a halt as he graduates, of like looking back at everything. And so that was kind of an intentional kind of thing of like it was a roller coaster of an experience of like you start out really quick and then end in a much more clear state of that clarity kind of idea.
And it's interesting because I'm probably seeing that way because in a sense I'm teaching it, right? And I'm
Mm,
saying to emerging filmmakers all over when I'm showing the film, think about it this way. And then when you go to write it, hit the page, you can have this formula in mind
right.
if you don't have a natural formula, which clearly you had. And yet at the end of the day, it is that sort of action, reaction, and reflection, not only in each scene and each moment, but the actual entire arc of the film is that. And it kind of ends in that reflective place,
Yeah.
processing everything. And that's just what you were going through. And you just happen to kind of use that formula without even being conscious of it, which is fascinating. Finally, some of the little things that help create such an engaging and authentic world, the score and sound design. I'm a huge fan of tone and atmosphere. For me, that's really what attracts me to most art.
Mm.
The symbols. His name is Miles. The raccoon. How did these elements materialize for the final product?
Um, so do you mean like the tone and then the symbols? Like how did those kind of fit together?
Well, let's start with the score and the sound design. Again, was that something that was part of the process as you were writing, or did that come after the fact?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, the score I think was a big part of it in the writing part of it, and so for sure that's a great like question I guess of like sometimes I think Tarantino says this another reference, but he writes to like music a lot, and he'll have the song he knows he wants in his head like playing while he's writing that scene, and so I did that a lot. I just spammed like Beach House and what you know for like so long that it became like my most played on Spotify just because I was writing it for the film. And so I would rewind and then play it again as I was writing the scene and then rewind and rewind. So like you can kind of feel it as you're writing it. And so yeah, the
And
tone,
that helps you create the arc of the scene based on
yes,
the
yeah,
song is taking your pen
yeah. I
technically
guess
on that
like
journey.
it's much easier to then just write to a song, and so I guess it was just natural in that way for me. And then yeah, in terms of the symbols, like it genuinely just came up, I guess, after in the process where it was like the raccoon was a thing where I was trying to represent what Miles had lost and something that's like a kind of fleeting thing in his life that he remembers. Um, but yeah, and his first experience with death and all that stuff. And so yeah, that was a symbol for that I realized I could use. But yeah, I didn't really think about it too much in terms of symbols.
Any special reason it was a raccoon? Is anything like a personal experience, or
Um,
it worked?
no, I think it was just the natural animal
Yeah.
to get run over by a car, I guess.
And Miles, the name, intentional?
No, it was just I don't know. I sometimes with names, it's funny because I say it's not intentional, and then I'm like, but I do spend a lot of time like thinking about a name because sometimes it's like, nah, that just doesn't fit his character. And so I don't know. Some names for some reason, maybe it's just bias, like have a certain personality to it already. I guess it's different for everyone.
It's so funny because I do talk about the name. It was one of the first things I noticed.
Mm,
Because the film is his life is moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour,
mm,
and I also think about the Robert Frost poem. Miles to go before I sleep, and that
mm,
seems to epitomize this character. He's in this place of just seeing the long road, but being in a very instant moment, a
right.
very definitive moment at the same time. And the fact that that wasn't intentional, and yet I felt it,
Mm,
throughout the film. And I love sharing it and just saying to students, sometimes you never really know
yeah.
the depth of something that you're putting into it. But I'm a big fan of that
Thank you.
choice.
It's funny because yeah, I think that's a great point. Like sometimes it's purely subconscious, like what you're trying to communicate that you have no
Mhm.
idea about. And so I'm glad that at least um it's had some meaning to someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you're an accomplished high school filmmaker with a clear passion and determination to succeed as a writer and director, and then you decide to attend Harvard and study economics.
Mm.
What informed that decision?
Oh, let me look around here. No, no, I'm joking. I yeah, it was. it's always been a dream of mine, but also I was thinking of what school to go to, and USC and NYU, these were like top of the choice because I wanted to become a filmmaker. But at the same time, I was like, I have this lucky privilege where I feel like I've learned a lot of the filmmaking in high school and middle school where I made stuff myself. And so I was like, okay, I'm checking the syllabus of like what they do in film school, and I'm hearing about a lot of people going to film school, and I have some friends that have gone, and I'm like, what do you do there? And I realized that I've already done a lot of the stuff in middle school and high school, not to take away from like film school
Mhm.
and offer it values, but like for me, it was just more important to learn about just other things in life and also meet people that are not in the film industry and that have different experiences that come from different places, and it's just always energizing to learn from people that are doing other stuff, and it grounds you kind of, but also expands like the ideas that you want to communicate in your work. There's a line of like, um, you it's hard to write what you know when all you know is like you're writing, and so what you write. And so like it's really important, I think, for a lot of writers to just experience more, I guess, and then because then the kind of inspiration and ideas will come more naturally, I guess. But
Right.
yeah, at least for me.
Just broadening diversifying your experience
Yeah.
and doing things outside of the world that you've been in for so long.
Yeah.
Any special reason economics?
Okay, so economics for me was there's a bunch of options. Like there was no way I was going to do something STEM because I knew that I wanted to do filmmaking still outside of school, and STEM is like just too much time consuming. Although I would have loved to, and obviously, and honestly, I love that world, and I still want to go back to it maybe one day. But I think, yeah, and it was it was like mostly picking between economics and psychology, stuff that I felt like was easier and I could do on the side, but also be learning a lot about the world and the human experience and all that comes with it. Yeah.
With everything going on, have you had a chance to sort of integrate with the Harvard culture, and what has your experience there been like?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Harvard culture in a way where I just was able to meet a ton of cool people and just learn about what they're doing. And I have a ton of friends that are working in tech, and finance, and just the stuff they're doing is so different from what I'm doing. And it's always, and also politics, and a lot of people are, and so yeah, just seeing that on campus, and a lot of protests happening, like at least back like last fall. And so you just if you when you're immersed in that world and you're hearing about what other people are doing, it's so much more energizing, I guess, than to just be locked away in your own bubble and writing.
That's good, and I'm glad that you have that at least some sense of a balance. So you're at Harvard, and then out of nowhere, sort of, Darren
Mm,
Aronofsky emails, and everything changes.
yeah.
What has it been like adapting your short into a feature film for a major Hollywood studio? And
Yeah.
I give you a ton of credit because I can only imagine the challenges that you're facing.
Thank you. No, it's been a wild ride, but I guess recently it's been much more of a slow grind because writing the film has taken up my whole life basically. Like every day I'm going through writer's block, but also sometimes coming up with great ideas and going back and forth with the producers, and the studio, because the studio has very specific mandates of a movie they want to make. And so negotiating that with them and being able to creatively compromise sometimes on things that you don't want to compromise on, has been a tough process. But I guess on a brighter note, in terms of the thrill you get from immediately receiving an email like that is obviously just unlike anything else because you're at the precipice of possibly your first feature film with a studio and all that comes with that. So
What
um,
was the first thing you did after getting that email?
um, the first thing I did, geez, oh, so it's funny. He emailed me, and then I got the email and I was like, oh my God, yes. Like I've been trying to find a reason to drop out. Like, please call me, and I gave him my number. And then I took a shower and I was like just pacing around. But then he just didn't respond for like 4 hours. And so I went to class because like I still have class, right? And then I come out and I realize I've missed a call from him. And I'm like, oh no, like this is terrible. Like this, I'm losing the opportunity, right? But then I call him back and he answers, and we hit it off. And so I guess the next thing I did was start writing, like start brainstorming like my pitch.
Just got
Um,
right to it.
yeah, I guess, yeah, and sometimes, yeah, I guess celebrated with my friends.
I can't imagine the pressure. Did you do you talk to the execs or whoever the team
Yeah,
that you're working with on a daily basis, or what's that like?
yeah, probably like a weekly basis. Sometimes more, sometimes less. It depends if they're like, okay, now go write it. then I just take like a month off and just be writing it on my own. But sometimes when we're like, okay, what's next? Like we'll talk about the story and stuff like that. So yeah, it's mostly Darren's team because Darren is like, he's obviously a very busy guy. And so
Yeah,
it's his team at Protozoa that I do the day to day with. But when we need Darren, we call him in. Yeah.
sure. How much longer do you think you have to go? Do you have any sense of that? Like when this is going to be finished and then what happens next?
You have some of a sense of it, but it's mostly like up to the studio when they want to greenlight it. And so our hope is that we're sending in this the script in the next few months, and then when we send it in, hopefully they read it before the summertime and they have a good sense of whether they're going to make it or not. And so I hope before the summertime or during the summertime, we'll have a good sense of whether they're going to greenlight it or not, because the first read is going to be really telling of whether they like it or not. And so, yeah, if they greenlight it, then we start casting and financing. And that is a really, really exciting part because then like everything goes public and then you're doing pre-production and it's all like I probably have to take a year off.
For everyone listening, like just think about what Wesley just said. After all of this work, after all of the success, there's still a chance that this might not get greenlit.
Yeah, yeah. And so
but from this studio, there's always then an opportunity to take your baby and go somewhere else and all of those things. And obviously it's going to get greenlit. We all know this, but
right.
But really the perspective is important. There's this is the nature of this world, is that you can do everything in your power and you've done everything in your power to get to this point. And yet still the decision ultimately in many ways is out of your hands. And but that does that change you? It can't, right? You just have to stay true.
It doesn't, but I'd say one thing that I've learned is that you never want to be too tied to one thing. Like, for example, Nothing Except Everything obviously is the thing that I became known for and was like the thing that got me this deal. But I'm working on other stuff as well and trying to get that sold so that I have multiple avenues going. And it gives also other people incentive to then greenlight the film or like make the other movie that I'm making. And so it's you want to make sure that you're not working for them. You know what I mean? You want to make sure that it's like you have as many things going on so that if one thing doesn't work out, you can at least do the other. But I hope obviously it does work out.
Of course. So another thing that's amazing is you're now repped by an agency or maybe even two, 3 Arts Entertainment, WME. What's that like? And I know a little bit about this world. I imagine a lot of our listeners do not. So, I've been in those offices and I've met with agencies and those kind of things. What's it like?
It's really cool. I'd say so. I have managers at 3 Arts and then an agent at WME, and they're slightly different, but they kind of serve the same purpose of like guiding me through the process because I don't really know much about the contracts and the money aspect of it, and so they're kind of guiding me through of like, oh, we need to fight for these rights because if we then we need to be able to take it to other studios if it doesn't get made, stuff like that, and so they kind of know the details of that. But also they're the ones that are setting me up all these meetings because they have all the connections in Hollywood. And so I'm able to then meet with a lot of producers that I wouldn't have been able to meet with. And so that's the main benefit for me. And the main benefit for them is that if I get a movie sold, they get a X percentage of it. And so, yeah, it's a very good and I'd say symbiotic relationship because they're kind of always, at least to some degree, in the best interest for me. Or I don't know if I said that right, but they're like working for me in a way, but I'm also working for them. So, yeah.
Sure. And it sounds like you had to go that route just because you're so new to the game at this level. You really needed that support to make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could just make the independent film without anyone else, but then how are you going to get the money? How are you going to get the cast? And so all these things that you logistically need to do, you need people who know the industry inside out.
And related to all of that, and I think this is a really important question, how do you balance all of this? College, development of the feature, perhaps even a sliver of personal life?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely tough. I think you just have to make sure you have your priorities straight. For me, it's like I want to have a girlfriend. I want to have a good relationship with my family, and I want to be able to spend time with them. And so, but then I also need to let them know sometimes when I have to just lock in and put my head down. And so I'd say, yeah, I mean, I still don't know sometimes. It always feels like, there's not enough hours in the day. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you just find a way to get it done.
I think not enough hours in the day is a great way to live life. Because you want more of it, and that's a good thing. That means you're doing things that make you happy, that you're passionate about. when's the last time you took some time off and what did you do? Because I
Um,
imagine it's really hard to turn off.
yeah, I think I never. I mean, my mom always tells me every day, like, take some time off, Wesley. Because even when I go on vacation, I'm working like during the night and the morning, and so. Um, but I'd say I went recently to Thailand with my girlfriend, and that was a ton of fun. I was working some there, but most of the time it was just like rock climbing and just seeing stuff, and so that was a lot of fun. Um, yeah,
Good for you. I'm glad. Many of our listeners have dreams of making a feature length film. Um, and I say many, I probably mean all. What are the biggest challenges of transitioning from a short to a feature? I mean, that's a
yeah,
daunting task.
yeah. I'd say probably from the first part, like not logistical part of like, because short films you can usually independently finance with either your own money or money that you could find from just like a nice rich person, to be honest. And they will, because it's like, sometimes it's like $10,000. Sometimes for me it was 45. And so you can find that money on your own. But then when you make a feature film, like realistically, unless you have some crazy connections, you won't be able to get the film made yourself, and so you're going to rely on other people. And so when you have other people that you're as their money's at stake, they're going to have a lot of opinions. And so that's one of the, I guess, logistical things you need to worry about, of like of just sometimes your movie that you want to make is not going to be your movie anymore. It's going to be somewhat your movie, but then it's going to be also a lot of other people's visions. And then I'd say from a narrative point of view, in terms of your creatively, writing a feature film, for me at least, it was really hard being able to then expand into a narrative, like because a lot of people are like, okay, nothing except everything, how is this going to be made into a feature film? It feels like just 12
It's
minutes long.
already there. Yeah.
It's a kind of just a vibe piece, and how are you going to make it into a narrative, right, with like an inciting incident, like with ups and downs that this guy has to go through, like an actual plot. And so that was a tough thing for me, at least, of just figuring out that how I would be able to expand it into a feature with a narrative that's sustained the whole way, and with ups and downs that our audience can grow with.
I can't imagine. I know you probably can't talk about it too much. I don't know if you can or not, but how different is it going to be? So like,
Yeah,
let's just say I'm the world's biggest Nothing Except Everything fan. Is it still Miles?
yeah, yeah. um, I don't know how much I could say. I'd say it's it's pretty different though, and I don't want to disappoint anyone. And so I want to, I guess, the things that will be maintained for sure. And I think that's one of the reasons that Sony liked it enough, is that at least the pitch is that it maintains the tone and the themes and the style that everyone kind of fell in love with for Nothing Except Everything. But the story is just completely different. It takes more of a sci-fi bend on things, and so yeah,
Cool. And you've definitely had that sci-fi lean,
yeah.
but the kind of sci-fi that I like, that realistic human sci-fi
Mm,
that's rooted in humanity, Mute being a great example of that. And
mm,
you just gave me a great transition to my next question. One of my favorite things I heard you talk about, and I have to say to anyone listening, Wesley has been incredibly gracious to so many people. He's done so many interviews with big dogs, with high school students, with everyone that asks, and I think that says a lot about you. And something else you just said says a lot about you, that you don't want to disappoint, that you care about your viewer. And that's a tough balance as an artist. But the fact that you acknowledge it, I think it just shows your humility, and the fact that you do care about the people watching your films. But I heard you talk about the balance between originality and accessibility
mm.
when it comes to your stories, and that there's a very fine line between both. Can you explain why that's so important?
Yeah, I guess the accessibility thing, in a way where it's like, yeah, sometimes like you want to be original and find your own voice, but then sometimes you're like, okay, maybe this won't work for everyone else. And so I'd say one of the most important things is that remembering that what is true to you is probably going to be one of the most powerful things to other people as well, because it's it's so true. And if you know it's at least true to you, then I'm sure it's somewhat of a universal experience to other people out there. And even if you think that, no, this is not going to translate, and so I think that is was at least what got Nothing Except Everything through the line. But yeah, in terms of why it's so difficult though, is because, if you're, by definition, something that's accessible has usually been done a lot of times because people know it's accessible, right? People know that other people like it. And then by definition, something that's original is not accessible because it hasn't been done before. It's like a startup. Like you're trying to create a product that no one has done before, but people are going to like. It's easy to just be original and not be accessible, but it's also relatively easy to be accessible but not original. As there's tons of movies that are made every year that are like that. And so you want to try to strike a fine line between the two. I think tons of people in the industry are trying to do that. I think every filmmaker honestly wants to do some degree of that. And so that's why I think it's really, really difficult.
Another thing that I heard you talk about is the importance of focusing on one project at a time and pouring yourself into it. And you also just said that you're careful that you're working on some other things, but at the same time, I think this is important for our community in particular because we often get 3, 5, 7 submissions from one filmmaker, and they're all just okay, right? They're all okay, but we're watching them and we're saying, man, if you just did one project, poured yourself into one project completely,
Yeah.
and you could create something special rather than 3 or 5 average productions.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? And what have you learned from your experience?
I think for sure I agree with it. And if you're for nothing except everything, like I guess you can even see like my uploads on YouTube, like they're very infrequent and I wish they were more frequent, but sometimes like I'm like if I spend less time on it, it just won't be as good. And so for nothing except everything, I genuinely just spent probably I like a year and a half just writing, making it, and then post production in terms of it. And so for a short film, it's pretty long,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it's the whole thing. If I think one of the things people have said about it is it feels like a complete project where every second there's something happening and that's intentional. And so that was important to me that it feels like a full like work of like 12 minutes 52 seconds that doesn't no time is wasted. And so that was important to me. Um, and even for this feature film that I'm making, I've been writing it for, I mean, I started writing it before the movie even blew up, the short film, before I knew it was going to get made
Okay.
into a feature. And so it's been close to 3 years now, or 2.5 years. And so, yeah, it's like, I really do stand by it because, it's quality over quantity at the end of the day, especially for filmmaking. To make it, to get your film noticed, you need to be in the top 1% of, for example, if it's YouTube, it's YouTube. If it's festivals. Like I'm sure, as you know, like not many movies get at least into the festival and then nominated and then win.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're trying to make something that creates a splash, it needs to be like uh, at that level. And so, I'd recommend at least focusing on one at a time.
Yeah, I love that, and I completely agree from experience. Um, what other advice do you have for our community? For those listening to this who envy your achievement and dream of similar success and opportunities, this is your chance to talk to yourself when you were in high school. If you could go back, what would be a key piece of advice that you would say to our young filmmakers?
Yeah, I think I said this at the elevation speech, but I think when people ask me that, I always go to the personal thing. Like when I always tell a story too. I guess it's getting repetitive. When I made Nothing Except Everything, before I made it, my teacher, my high school videography teacher, who I'm pretty sure he was the one that told me about All American High. By the way, I'm not sure. I
Thank
don't
you.
remember it as well.
Thank you, teacher.
Yeah, Mr. Silva, shout out. And but he's been such a great mentor to me, obviously. But he was the one that was like, Mute and Eve, they're great. They show a lot of technical ability that you can tell a story and you can get a cast and crew together and make something at least good. But can you make something that is personal to you and goes to the next level? Because then it can reach an emotion and a level of the viscerality and kind of that feel that will touch many more people's. And he kind of predicted it. And he was like, if you do that, then you'll reach the next level. And I was like, I kind of took it to heart. And then I tried to, and as I was going through my own things in high school and my senior year of high school and graduating, I was like, damn, like why hasn't a movie been made kind of like this in this vein? Obviously, it's still much like a lot of movies, but in a way where it was like, okay, it feels like no one has made this specific one yet, and I could kind of be of value in that sense. And so, it was the most personal thing I'd made up until that point, and it obviously worked to that degree of like a lot of other high schoolers and not even high schoolers responded to it. And so, yeah, I think genuinely, just if you tell something really, really personal to yourself, it will stand out just because it feels like something like you could have made it. And so, yeah.
I love that. shameless question here, but important to me because you've dedicated yourself to writing and directing, and I've dedicated my career now to supporting and developing and recognizing
Yeah.
emerging filmmakers and storytellers. What did your success at All American mean to you?
I mean, it was genuinely, it felt like, because obviously your festival is like not only the biggest that in for this space of high school filmmaking, which was, arguably 5 years ago was very, very small. Um, but you lifted it to a degree where you have all these filmmakers now being noticed on a huge stage. Um, then to be offered to come back and speak in front of that audience was an honor. And so it has meant a lot, not even just that speaking, but the progression of being able to be validated externally by other people being like, your work is getting better and it's improving, and being recognized on that stage was a great honor. So, yeah, thank you, Tom.
Well, and thank you for giving us the fuel that we need to keep going and to inspire so many within our community. And I have to say, we've received so many compliments after your award show, Elevation Award Q&A. People just, it really resonated with people. And to be honest, I was a little nervous about it, bringing back an alumni to be this special guest. How would that be received? And it was received incredibly well. And I think it's because you're so humble and honest, and open about your story and your growth as an artist, and I'm really grateful for that. I have one last question. I was talking to Andrew Jenks yesterday, and we were just kind of catching up, and I was like, oh, I'm writing an intro for Wesley Wang, who's going to be on the podcast tomorrow. He says hello, by the way, and he
Hey, Andrew.
mentioned that he helped you get a gig working on a documentary about the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And he was like, yeah, it was really weird because it was a paid gig, but Wesley refused payment. And he said he just wanted to get experience out of it. Do you remember
That's funny.
this?
I remember it now. I don't even remember I declined the money. It's funny because sometimes I'll ask to do something that's paid. I don't even really care if it's paid sometimes, because it's like it's just really just I just want as many opportunities and to meet people as much as possible. But sometimes, my dad was like, "Hey, sometimes if you just like say you don't want the pay, then they'll be like, oh, like this guy really is a go-getter, and it shows that, blah 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 blah." And so that, I guess that was one of my tactics. But it's funny, Andrew, I cold emailed Andrew at the end of one of the, I think it was Mute, after Mute got in and I was on stage with him. I was like, hey Andrew, what's your email? I have like a pitch for you and whatever. And at the end of all of that, like he was like, I don't have much for you, but here's like this thing where you can translate a script. I don't know how much I could say about it 'cause I don't know if it's
No,
out
you
yet, but
can. That's okay. It was transcribed, like, yeah.
yeah, like transcribing the script for a documentary, which was really menial work, honestly. Like I didn't learn much from it in a sense, but it was just an opportunity for me to see how, I guess, it was done, but also be able to form a relationship with Andrew, which was the most important thing for me. And so yeah.
I love that with all your success, all of the things I read at the beginning of this, which is a really pretty incredible list, you're still looking for unique experiences and still looking to grow and just broaden your horizons as an artist. It's an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you, Wesley, for an insightful glimpse into your experiences and motivations as a storyteller. Of course, I encourage all of you to check out links to Wesley's impressive body of work in the description. And thanks, of course, to all of you for tuning in and joining us. I remind you that this is just one of many in-depth conversations with the future of film. You can go to hsfilmfest.com for more information on the All-American High School Film Festival. And please subscribe and share across all platforms to support artists like Wesley and, of course, our entire community of emerging student storytellers. I will see you the next time. Wesley, such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I am in your corner, rooting for you all the way. I certainly hope we can keep in touch.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the platform and appreciate everyone tuning in.
All right, get back to work.
Okay, all right, geez.